In addition to the line segment tool, there are 4 other line tools used to create various shapes in Illustrator. Although all of these shapes can technically be created using other methods, these tools provide a much faster way to create various line-based shapes in Illustrator. Let's take a closer look. I'm beginning this video with the lines.ai file already open on my machine. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down in the Tools panel to the Line Segment tool. Now, what we could do, if you click and hold on this tool, you'll see all of the tools that we're going to be going over in this lesson. But what I'm going to do to make it easier to access these tools is I'm going to click on this little strip out here to the right to detach this set of tools to make it a little bit easier for me to access when I need it. Now, the first tool we're going to go over is the Line Segment tool. And the basic purpose of this tool is to simply draw straight lines from one point to another. So as an example, I'm just going to click somewhere on my page here, and if I click and drag, you see that I can draw this line in any direction, and it's simply going to draw a straight line wherever I let go. So when I let go of my cursor, you can see that it's drawn a straight line segment at that location. Now, there's a couple other things you can do here. I'm going to go ahead and delete that, because if I hold down the Option key on Mac or the Alt key on Windows, I can click and drag to draw the line from the center of where I clicked. So I'll go ahead and let go of that. We'll delete that. And then in addition, what you can do is if you want to draw a perfectly vertical, horizontal, or angled line, you can hold down the Shift key on your keyboard. And you'll see that as I drag, it's snapping to the angled or perpendicular increments. So I could turn off my Smart Guides here. If I go to View and choose Smart Guides, it might make it a little bit easier for you to see as I'm dragging here. So holding down the Shift key, it's just going to snap to either a 45-degree angle, 0, or 90 degrees. So that could be really helpful down here because I want to create a line for each of these 3 sections here. So I'm actually going to turn my Smart Guides back on, and that's going to make it really easy. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and click and drag, and when my cursor gets to the edge of the photo on both sides, I can release, and that has drawn a straight line. Now what I'm going to do, it currently has no fill and no stroke, so in my swatches panel, I'm going to choose the black swatch, and in the stroke panel, I'll increase the weight to 3 points. And then if I wanted 2 more here, I could draw them manually, but it probably makes more sense to just use my selection tool, and while holding down the Alt or Option key and the Shift key, just drag until I make a copy for each one of these sections. So we'll do one more here. There we go. Now, we can also draw vertical lines. So if I grab my Line Segment tool again, I can start up here at the top, and I can just Shift-click and drag to draw a vertical line in much the same way. This one, we're going to make the gray color, and in the stroke panel, we're just going to make that 1 point wide. And now we can see we have a nice gray line, and if I wanted more, I can just use the selection tool to make copies in between the text areas. And that now gives me the look and feel that I'm going for. Now, to experiment with these other line tools, I'm going to go ahead and go to my Artboards panel, and I'm going to double click on the Lines artboard, just giving me a clean slate that I can work with. So the next tool I'm going to cover here is the Arc tool. And the Arc tool's job is to, well, make arcs. And you'll see that if you click and drag, that this tool's job is to make arcs from where you click to where you drag to. Now, there's a couple of keyboard shortcuts we can use here. So if you hold down the Shift key, it's going to make it a quarter of a circle while drawing. And then what you can also do is as you're dragging, you can use your arrow keys on your keyboard, the up and down arrow keys, to change the arc or the curve of the arc. So I'm going to go ahead and let go and delete right now. I'm just going to click once with my mouse because using this tool, you can precisely define the properties of any of these tools. And so, what we could do here is I can set the slope. I'm going to set this to 0. And then you can also determine whether this creates an open or closed path. You can base it along the X or Y axis, and you can set the X and Y lengths as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and click OK, and that's going to draw a very small shape right now. But what I'm going to do now is if I click and drag, and I use the up and down arrow keys, you can see that I can make adjustments here to how I want this curve to appear. If I drag to the left or if I go to the top, it's just going to create an arc in different amounts. And using my arrow keys allows me to adjust them differently. Now you can always press the space bar just with other tools to reposition this. And you can also use the C key on your keyboard. If you press the C key, it's going to close this path. You can press C again to open it, and that allows you to open or close that path. So if I release this, that's going to essentially create like a quarter of a circle. Now, the next tool is our spiral tool. And this offers kind of a totally different set of options that we can choose. So what I'm going to do here is using the spiral tool, I'm just going to click and drag, and you can see, as you might expect, it's going to create a spiral. Now, there's a couple of things you can do. Again, you can use the space bar to reposition it, as I've done here. But you can use the up and down arrow keys on your keyboard, which will increase and decrease the number of segments. And it's hard to see here. I'm going to try to zoom in, but I'll press the down arrow key. And you can see that when I get to a certain point, it opens way up. But as I start adding the up arrow key, it just increases the number of segments. Now, if you hold down the Command key on Mac or the Control key on Windows and you drag, it's going to increase or change the decay, basically how tight the spirals are. And if you let go of that key and then continue dragging, it's just going to make it bigger or smaller. If I hold down Command or Control and I drag outwards, that's now spreading these out more. But as I drag in, the circles get tighter, and then of course I can use my up arrow key to increase the number of segments. So there's a lot of options, that you have available here. You just have to practice and make some adjustments to how you want this to appear. So of course when you let go, now it's going to draw the shape, and you can see that it currently has a fill of none and a stroke of that dark gray, which was the last stroke that I used. And of course with this tool you can just click once to bring up the dialog that allows you to control the properties as well. Now I'm going to go ahead and cancel that. And the next tool is the rectangular grid. So if I click and drag, this is really a great way to just create a grid of squares. If I hold down the Shift key, it's going to make a perfect square. But some of the tricks you can use, if you press the up arrow, that's going to increase the number of vertical segments. Use the right arrow, that's going to increase the number of horizontal segments. And you can change those. You can decrease them again if you want, adjust them however you wish. And in addition, what you can do is you can use 4 keys on your keyboard as you're dragging. And that's going to be the X key, which is going to shift the grids to the left. You can use the C key, which will shift the grids to the right. And then you can also use the F key, which will shift the grids to the bottom, and the V key, which will shift the grids to the top. Now, these generally move in a pretty drastic fashion with the keyboard shortcuts, so of course you can always just click with your mouse, and then the skew here for the horizontal and vertical dividers allows you to make a more precise adjustment. So if you wanted to reset it back to the way it was, just set them both to 0, and then you can go ahead and click OK, and that's going to draw your shape. Now, last but not least is the polar grid tool. And as I click and drag with this tool, I can hold down Shift to make a perfect shape and the space bar to reposition. And what I can also do is I can use the up arrow key to increase the number of segments and the down arrow key to decrease the number of segments, depending on what you're looking for. And then in addition, you can use the right and left arrow keys to increase the number of grids for your polar grid tool, depending on what you're trying to create here. And then you can also use those same 4 keys, which is the X key to shift the segments towards the center, or the C key to shift the segments towards the outside, And in addition, you can use the F key to adjust the polar grids and the V key to adjust them in the opposite direction. So you have a lot of choices here. And just like with the other tools, you can just click once to precisely define the number of concentric dividers and radial dividers as well. And then you can also adjust the skew to shift them one way or the other. So we can reset these to 0 if I want them all to be reset to a standard value. As you can see, there are many choices available for you to choose from when using these tools. Your use of these tools will vary depending on each project and the needs of those projects. Knowing what these tools are capable of could save you a lot of time when working on projects in the future.